Nivedita, can you hear me?
Yes.
So Indira Gandhi did that with the government. And meanwhile, she's got a lot of friendly countries on our side
Yeah.
to do this battle. Next thing that I want to tell you is about the Mukti Bahini.
Right.
Now, the Mukti Bahini, how it started was, I mean, even in April, with all these refugees that came in from East Pakistan, 10 million of them, there were a number of people who were ex-army or guerrilla fighters who had been taking on the Pakistan army even earlier. And they wanted assistance to get back into their country. So what was decided, without anybody knowing, of course, is that India also sent some military officers and some people dressed like refugees
Oh.
to organize these chaps. Because, it's a disparate group. Disparate group cannot do much if they wish to act against the enemy.
Right.
What you need is an organized group. Like, for instance, the Pakistan terrorists, they're very well organized. They're just like military commandos. That means that you have a commander and you have 6 or 7 chaps under him, very highly trained. You have communications and you have weapons. You've got a task which is given by a higher commander. And you infiltrate behind the enemy lines and you do your thing. So these people had to be organized and trained, which was done over a period of a few months. In fact, I must tell you a story that when I was an instructor in tank gunnery in Ahmednagar, I was a captain. And I used to study very hard because instruction is one thing, but there's a large amount of information that you are not necessarily telling your students. But if the student is bright and is interested in a particular subject, then you have to delve further into that subject. I'll give you an example of a tank gun, for instance. Why is the tank gun firing in a flat, high velocity trajectory vis-a-vis an artillery gun which goes up and then down, because of the type of targets you're going to engage. Then how does the propellant work? You've got when you load a tank gun, there's a what is known as a slow explosive inside a case, which is set off. That pushes the main projectile out of the barrel at a very high speed, and then that projectile could be a tungsten steel projectile which penetrates armor, or it could be a high explosive which bursts when you hit the target. So what is that propellant and how does it work? So what happened is that we had a person called Major Jimmy Sarkar. He's a Bengali. And he was an instructor in our tactical wing. And I knew him very well because when I had done my squadron commander's course there, he was one of the instructors. And he had taken a liking to me. So he rang me up. He said, look, I am becoming a lieutenant colonel. And I have to go and take over Central India Horse. That's one of our tank regiments, a light regiment. So I want to train myself. They had small Stuart tanks in those days. So they said, I'll go to the driving and maintenance regiment to learn all about the tank. I want to come to the gunnery unit to hear all about the gun from you. And then he'd go to the signal regiment to hear about the radio communications. Tactics he knew. So when he came to me, I said, how much time have you got? He said, 1 hour per day for, let us say, 6 days or 7 days. So I studied up the subject very well because he's a very clever man. I had to go beyond what you normally teach a student. I taught him that. He was very impressed because I even studied the Encyclopedia Britannica on explosives. There are about 20 pages on it, if you ever do that. So what is the theory behind the shooting and etc.? Then I also told him, because you've got light tanks at the moment, but in due course of time, you'll get bigger tanks. So I told him a lot about the bigger tank and the way the gun functions. And the theory of shooting. I won't go into that with you. There are a lot of details involved. So he was very impressed with me. So after it finished, he thanked me most profusely for extra time that I had spent on him. It was all outside office hours. Then he went back and made a big sheet of paper about the books that I should read. He said, to develop yourself further, the books, he shows how keen that officer was. These are the books that you should read. And these books covered not only history, culture, marital life and sex, and philosophy, how to deal with human beings, all these books. He said, if you can read even half of them, you will develop your mind sufficiently to reach an eminent position in this country, which he had done already. So he became a lieutenant colonel and went there. So he and I knew each other very well. So I'd gone to Calcutta for something. I was in some job or the other, and I met Jimmy Sarkar. So he said, hello, Tich, how are you? So I looked at him. I said, who the hell are you? Because he literally dressed like a sweeper in the street. He said, I am now in the Mukti Bahini. I have to dress like that.
Okay.
Poverty sticker, torn shirt, torn dhoti, you see? And he was a major general at that time. He could speak Bengali. So what we did was that we took Bengali speaking officers and they went and controlled these refugees. And organized them. Some of them are very good fighters, to organize them into proper groups, give them tasks, and then infiltrate them behind the Pakistani lines so that they did a lot of damage, blowing up bridges and creating alarm and despondency behind the enemy lines, and also in various towns of East Pakistan, going to the various villagers and telling them time is coming when the Indian army will come. They're going to take a few more months, but then keep your morale up and join us. Let's play hell with the Pakistanis meanwhile, blowing up bridges and or jeep of a commander going from A to B somewhere in East Pakistan, you blow it up or shoot at it or do something. And so they did all that. I found that the director of military operations. Now, how I know all this knowledge is because I went into military operations directed later on in life when I was a basic general, and I studied all these documents that are there as to how this Mukti Bahini was arranged and who controlled it and how it was controlled and why it was controlled, and also the operational plans. Anyway, the director of military operations at that time was a man called K.K. Singh. K.K. Singh was my second commanding officer. And he was the brigade commander of the 1st Armored Brigade in 1965 war, when we in the 16 Cavalry, which was his regiment, by the way, he had commanded this regiment, got very upset with him because he didn't treat us too kindly. Well, whatever it was, he is a very brilliant officer himself. And he was the director of military operations during the planning and execution of the Mukti Bahini phase of the 17th war. Now, the Mukti Bahini started right from March, April, May. The actual war took place in December. So you can see there were 4 or 5, 6 months involved of that operation behind the enemy lines. K.K. Singh then got, he was a major general at that time in military operations, and he got promoted to lieutenant general, and he took over one corps, which was near the Samba area, carrying out his task of acting against Pakistan in the West. The whole strategy here, Nivedita, was that the main attack of the Indian army would be against East Pakistan. But since West Pakistan is a powerful army and they would attack us in the West, in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir and so on, we had to defend that side. Now, the best form of defense is to do a little attack yourself. So we are ready to go into that side also and have it out, so that we prevent Pakistan from attacking in the West, and at the same time we can have a freedom to act in the East. And as you saw in the strategy of Sam Manekshaw, by taking the attack date forward to November, December, the northern border passes would be closed so that the Chinese could not interfere. And secondly, the Indian Army could get ready and coordinate with the Air Force and the Navy, who all would take plenty of time to get ready. And thirdly, to make sure that the monsoon was over. Monsoon is over by September, October. So give it another 2 months, November, October, November, expecting the rivers to not be in spate
Okay.
and that very riverine terrain of East Pakistan to be more capable of movement. This was the strategic plan. Now, in the armored division, we were to move to the west because without tanks, there was no point in going to the east. You wanted light tanks. What we had in the east was light tanks of the PT-76 and the Shafi. Shafi is well, the Pakistanis had the Shafi, but we had the PT-76, which is a floating tank of the Russians. It's very thin armor, and it can be killed very easily. But nevertheless, it can float, and it can. It has a small ground pressure, so it doesn't sink in riverine terrain. We had some larger tanks also, but they were kept more on the own side of rivers, or cross the rivers over a bridge, and then continue. Now, in the west, we expected. Pakistan saw that we were getting ready for this war, and the Americans saw that they were getting ready for the war. Now, what the Americans did was they sent the whole 7th Fleet from East China Sea into the Bay of Bengal. The 7th Fleet was led by an aircraft carrier, a very large aircraft carrier called the Enterprise. It was at that time one of the largest aircraft carriers of the American Navy. It has a flotilla of ships with it and a couple of submarines. And they came into West Bengal. I mean, they came to the Bay of Bengal, telling East Pakistan that we have come here to save our American people and other people in case India is attacked from East Pakistan. Now, Yahya Khan, who's the general, was the president of Pakistan. And you know the causes of this war. I won't repeat them too much, but the causes of this war, which was the depredation of the Pakistan army in East Pakistan, was given some description earlier by me in the 1965 war when we had a Bengali major come over to our side and give us some plan. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had won the election with his Awami team because Yahya Khan had an election. And since East Bengal population was much larger, they won the election. After won the election, then the party leader of the Awami party of East Bengal should be the prime minister, and that was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Instead of it, encouraged by Bhutto, who was the foreign minister, Yahya Khan put him into jail, saying, how dare a Bengali say that he should be prime minister of Pakistan. Prime minister of Pakistan has to be a Punjabi. But unfortunately, that doesn't go very far because if a man has won the election, how can you stop him from being the prime minister? After much ado, the Indian government also took it up to United Nations, and so did everybody. Pakistan was coerced to releasing Mujibur Rahman from the jail, on which he went to East Pakistan and said that if Pakistan does not play fair because we won the election, so there's an agitation that he started in East Pakistan against Yahya Khan's government because they were not giving effect to the results of the election. It's as simple as that. Now, in West Pakistan, you have an East Bengal regiment. So there were a number of Bengali officers and troops in West Pakistan known as the East Bengal regiment. They were all feeling very uncomfortable about this because they are Bengali. And they said that if we won the election, this is our due. So this agitation started in the east. And so Pakistan had a co-commander in the east. And earlier it was Rim Collier, a friend of mine, who had got posted out, and a chap called General Niazi had taken over East Pakistan. So he had about 2-3 divisions of infantry, and they were so confident of defending East Pakistan that they told the American friend that no go, India will not be permitted to come into this border at all. And Yahya Khan also told the Americans that India's got no chance, because whatever India does, we will attack from the west, and we sort them, capture Punjab. So the Americans sent the Seventh Fleet into the Bay of Bengal. Now, there are two things that what did the Americans? One was that in Vizag, Visakhapatnam, which is known as Vizag on the eastern coast, is our naval base. We had the Eastern Naval Fleet under a chap called Admiral Soman, who later became the Navy chief also. And Admiral Soman had with him not only Russian ships, but also Russian submarines.
Yes.
K-class submarine.
Yeah. I went to a
Now,
submarine in
no,
Visakhapatnam.
K-class submarine. The thing with these Russian ships and submarines is that every control system has orders in Russian put there. It's stamped on it. For instance, if there's a control system, it says how to use this. The directions of use are in Russian. So when our crews go to Russia for training on these ships, they spend over a year over there. They have to learn the Russian because all the orders are given in Russian. See? So when the Enterprise came here, they have a lot of communication that they were picking up all our communication. They got worried that they're all Russians speaking over here. That means the Indian Navy is full of Russians. Actually, that was not so. It was our own crews who were speaking Russian.
Right.
Now, the second thing that happened was that a nuclear submarine of the Russians came into the Bay of Bengal. This fellow came from Vladivostok. Normally, to explain to a nuclear submarine can remain submerged for 6-7 months. It never shows itself. It can fire missiles, nuclear-tipped missiles for great ranges from anywhere in the world because it is under the sea. You can't see it. They go very deep under the sea, so satellites and photography can't pick it up. So nuclear submarine is always hidden. Nobody knows where it is. What the Russians did was, they brought this from the East China Sea. Instead of going through the Sunda Strait into the Indian Ocean, that is, Sunda Strait is between Surabaya and between Java and the next set of islands of Indonesia. It's a deep, deep channel where you can go well under the ocean and get across to the Indian Ocean. Otherwise, you come to the Malacca Strait, which is a shallow strait, between Malaysia and Surabaya. That comes into the Indian Ocean. So it came to the Malacca Straits and it surfaced to periscope level because there it's a shallow channel. So you surface to periscope level to periscope, you understand? It's on the conning tower. And so the submarine is under the water, but the tower is sticking out, which is thick. So that was picked up by American satellites. And they came to know that the Soviet nuclear submarine also arrived in the Bay of Bengal. Now the American fleet commanders got a bit concerned that if they start interfering into the coming war between India and East Pakistan, then the Navy would not be allowed to act against the Indians because the Russians are present. That is one way that Soviet Union assisted India. Now there are a few very interesting stories here. I'll talk about the Navy first. In the Navy, there were two actions that were done which are very interesting. The chief of the Indian Navy was Admiral Nanda. He made a plan which is very interesting, and he told the Western Naval Command that's located in Bombay to attack Karachi Harbor. Now we had to attack Karachi Harbor is not easy because Karachi Harbor is firstly well defended. It's got shore-based guns, and secondly, it's got warships there. And thirdly, it's got submarines patrolling outside to make sure that nobody enters their area of interest in the sea. So you can't come very close to them for a normal naval flotilla to attack. But what we got is certain small boats, which are missile carriers, which can fire missiles with high explosive. But they're very small boats. They're not ocean going. They're meant for coastal defense.
Okay.
So the trick that was done here was that 3 or 4 of these coastal missile boats were towed by our ships to within about 20, 30 nautical miles of the Karachi coast and then released. Then these people have got that range with that missile. And the missiles that they fire are high explosive and they are attracted by metal. So they home in to metal. That means if there's a ship, it will be attracted there. And as luck would have it, the 2, 3 missile boats, they fired off their missiles and just landed on Karachi harbor. We sank one of the cruisers. That's a warship. We sank one or 2 of the merchant vessels that were in Karachi harbor. But the rest of the missiles went and swarmed into the huge fuel dump, the huge fuel tanks. You may have read
Oh my.
in the papers recently that in Cuba, there are large, huge tanks containing petroleum, oil. It's been hit by a lightning strike and has all gone into flame. It's still going on. They've asked for international assistance to try and put this out. Now you can imagine Karachi, these thin tanks, huge tanks containing crude oil, all over Karachi. I mean, the missiles went and hit that, and the whole thing went up in flame, and it was burning for days and days. So it was a very successful attack because, as you know, Pakistan's reserve fuel for tanks and aircraft and military vehicles and civil vehicles were knocked out by this attack. That is one action. We lost a destroyer called the Kukri, and Captain Mullah got the Veer Chakra because he stayed on board as a good Navy captain to save as many men as he could. But the whole ship sank. It was hit by a Pakistani submarine, by a torpedo, and Mullah went down with his ship. That's the tradition of the Navy captain. On the eastern coast, we had the Vikrant, the aircraft carrier.
INS Vikrant, yeah.
It was the flagship of the Eastern Naval Command. Small, it's a small aircraft carrier. Its task was to go to Chittagong and attack it with aircraft. He did just that. He went to Chittagong and he attacked Chittagong with aircraft. The Americans never interfered. See? Admiral Soman apparently was rung up by Indira Gandhi to say, look here, General, the American fleet is there. What are we going to do if they interfere? And Admiral Soman said, well, we are not at war with them. In case they interfere, we'll invite ourselves on board and have a drink with them. That's so Cockshaw commanders, very good actions fought. There's also a bit of luck here. The Pakistanis had the largest submarine called the Ghazi, which they knew that the Indian aircraft carrier had moved from Cochin shipyard on the west to Vizag in the east for this East Pakistan war. So it was lying in wait outside the Vizag harbor. And when the aircraft carrier comes out, we'll torpedo it and kill it. Now, we didn't even know about it. There's a whole film made on this. One of the Indian spies, a woman, got married to a Pakistani officer because she got the plans of this Ghazi submarine and she sent it to him to warn the Eastern Naval Command. But when these plans came to Eastern Naval Command with all her effort, apparently they didn't believe it. That the Pakistani ship was loitering outside Vizag. When an aircraft carrier moves out of a harbor, because the harbor is a constricted area and the enemy could be holding the exit of the harbor, one of the drills is that you take smaller boats with depth charges. You know, a depth charge is a charge, it's heavy TNT, which is fired from the deck of a smaller boat,
Mm.
goes up in the air and lands inside the ocean, goes down to a certain depth and explodes.
Mm.
Now, when you go inside the water and explode, that explosion
Mm.
causes a lot of damage to submarines.
Okay.
And submarines can be breached. You know, they've got a thin hull comparatively, so the hull gets breached and it gets killed. So this is a normal drill. 2 or 3 of these boats went out of the harbor, Vizag, shortly before, a few hours before the aircraft carrier was to come out. And they noticed a whole lot of debris coming up from the bottom of the sea floor. And among them were these rings, you know, these rubber rings for protection when you stand in the ocean with Ghazi written on it. So we came to know that Ghazi was there,
Oh.
and such is the luck of draw and war,
Mm.
that these people unknowingly fired all these depth charges there, and maybe it got killed there.
Mm.
That's the story of the demise of the Pakistani main submarine called the Ghazi.